David Rodriguez was scrolling through his phone on a lazy Tuesday morning when he saw the advertisement, $5,000 for a week-long sleep study. As a struggling college student working two part-time jobs, the money looked like a gift from heaven. He read the details twice, then 3 times. All he had to do was sleep in a special lab for 7 days, while scientists monitored his brain waves and body functions. The next morning, David stood outside a gleaming white building on the outskirts of the city. Everything looked professional: clean glass doors, security guards, and people in white coats walking around with clipboards. He checked the address. Again, this was definitely the place. Inside, a friendly receptionist handed him a stack of papers to sign. The language was full of big medical words that made his head spin. But it all seemed normal enough. Sleep studies were real things, right? He had heard about them on the news. Scientists needed to understand how people sleep to help those with sleeping problems. What David didn't know was that he wasn't chosen randomly. For months, Princess Zara had been watching Earth from her ship hidden behind the moon. Her people, the Andromedans, were in serious trouble. Their planet was dying, and worse, they were dying too. Centuries of relying on machines and technology had made them weak. They couldn't adapt to changes anymore. They couldn't even have babies naturally. But humans were different. Humans could survive almost anything. They could live in hot deserts, in freezing cold places. They could eat almost any food and recover from terrible injuries. Most importantly, they never gave up, even when things looked hopeless. Humans found ways to keep going. Zara's mission was simple but desperate. She needed to clone the best humans she could find and bring them back to her world. These human clones would help her people remember how to be strong again. Her scientists had studied thousands of humans through hidden cameras and secret tests. David was special. His body was healthy, his mind was sharp, and his heart was kind. He was exactly what they needed. The Sleep Study Center was actually Zara's secret laboratory. Every machine, every white coat, every friendly smile was part of an elaborate plan. David was led to a comfortable room with a bed that looked normal, but was actually filled with the most advanced technology in the galaxy. Tiny sensors would map every cell in his body while he slept. On the first night, David lay down on the soft bed and closed his eyes. He felt a little nervous, but the room was warm and quiet. Within minutes, he was fast asleep. Above him, invisible beams of light began scanning his body. Every piece of information about his DNA was being recorded and stored. Princess Zara watched from her control room. She was tall and elegant, with skin that seemed to glow softly in the dim light. Her eyes were larger than human eyes, and they held a sadness that came from watching her people slowly fade away. This human, David, might be their last hope. Night after night, the process continued. David slept peacefully while machines learned everything about him. His genetic code was copied and analyzed. His brain patterns were studied. His immune system was mapped. Everything that made David human was being prepared for duplication. But on the 6th night, something went wrong. A power surge hit the hidden ship, causing all the protective systems to shut down at once. Alarms rang through the facility, though David couldn't hear them through his deep sleep. Emergency lights flashed red in the corridors. Zara rushed to David's room to check on the equipment. She had never been this close to a human before. Her people usually stayed far away from the species they studied, but the machines were sparking, and she needed to make sure the human wasn't hurt. As she entered the room, another power surge hit. The energy field that kept David in artificial sleep suddenly disappeared. At the same moment, the protective barrier around Zara's own body failed. For the first time in her life, she was completely exposed to another living being. David's eyes opened slowly. He expected to see the familiar ceiling of his room, but instead, he saw the most beautiful woman he had ever seen. Her skin seemed to glow with a soft, warm light. Her eyes were the color of deep space, filled with stars he had never seen before. She looked scared and confused, just like he felt. "Who are you?" David whispered. Sitting up in bed, Zara froze. She had studied human language for months, but she had never actually spoken to a human before. I am. She struggled to find the words. I'm trying to help my people. Something strange was happening. The broken machines around them were still sparking with energy, and that energy was flowing between David and Zara. Neither of them understood it, but their bodies were responding to each other in ways that should have been impossible. David felt a warmth spreading through his chest. He could suddenly understand things he had never learned. He could see images in his mind of distant worlds and strange cities. And somehow, he could feel what Zara was feeling. Her fear, her sadness, her desperate hope. Zara was experiencing human emotions for the first time in her life. Her people had eliminated feelings long ago, deciding they were inefficient and caused too many problems. But now, looking at David, she felt something she had no name for. It was warm and overwhelming and made her want to stay close to him. The energy between them grew stronger. The failed cloning equipment that was supposed to copy David's DNA was instead creating a connection between them. Their genetic codes were mixing and combining in ways that neither species had ever experienced. Neither David nor Zara understood what was happening. They only knew that something had changed forever. The careful plan to clone a human had become something much more complicated and much more beautiful. As the emergency power finally kicked in and the lights returned to normal, David and Zara found themselves holding hands. They couldn't remember reaching for each other, but it felt natural and right. The machines around them had finally gone quiet, but the connection between them was just beginning. In that moment, the future of two worlds had changed forever. The clone that was never created had been replaced by something far more powerful, a bridge between two hearts that belonged to different stars. 3 weeks had passed since David returned home from what he thought was a simple sleep study, but nothing felt simple anymore. He woke up every morning with the strangest feeling that something important had happened, something he couldn't quite remember. The woman with the glowing skin haunted his dreams. Her sad, beautiful eyes seemed so real that he would reach out for her, only to wake up alone in his small apartment. At first, David tried to convince himself it was all just a weird dream. Sleep studies probably affected people's minds in strange ways. But the changes in his body were impossible to ignore. His vision had become incredibly sharp. He could read street signs from blocks away. He could hear conversations through walls. And most bizarrely, he had started understanding languages he had never learned before. Yesterday, he had walked past a group of tourists speaking what sounded like Italian, and somehow he understood every word they said. When he tried to remember studying Italian, he came up blank. It was like someone had downloaded new information directly into his brain while he slept. David tried to research the facility where the study had taken place, but it was as if the building had never existed. The address led to an empty lot. The phone number was disconnected. Even the advertisement he had responded to had vanished. From the internet, it was like someone had erased every trace of the place. Meanwhile, millions of miles away, Princess Zara was dealing with her own impossible situation. She stood in front of a medical scanner in her private quarters, staring at results that made no sense. The machine had run the test 5 times, and each time it gave the same impossible answer. She was carrying a life inside her body. For over 1,000 years, her people had stopped reproducing naturally. They had evolved beyond what they considered primitive biological functions. Children were created in laboratories, designed for specific purposes, grown in artificial chambers. The idea of a baby growing inside someone's body was ancient history, but the scanner didn't lie. Something was developing in her womb, something that was part her and part human. The failed cloning experiment had somehow created a real pregnancy instead of a copy. The energy surge that had connected her to David had mixed their genetic codes in ways that should have been impossible. Zara placed her hand on her stomach. She could feel something there, a warmth that seemed to pulse with life. Her people had forgotten how to feel many emotions, but she was experiencing something new every day. Yesterday, she had felt protective. Today, she felt scared. Tomorrow, she might feel something else entirely. The worst part was that she had to keep it secret. If the High Council discovered what had happened, they would consider her contaminated. Some would want to study her like a specimen. Others would want to eliminate the pregnancy and pretend it never happened. Her own people would see her as a failure, a princess who couldn't complete a simple mission without complications. But Zara wasn't sure she wanted to eliminate the pregnancy. Every time she thought about it, she felt a strange pain in her chest. She had never experienced sadness before, but she was learning that the idea of losing this connection to David hurt in ways she didn't understand. Back on Earth, David was experiencing his own strange symptoms. He would have sudden flashes of memory that weren't his own. He saw crystal cities floating in purple skies. He witnessed technology that made Earth's computers look like stone tools. He felt the loneliness of a dying civilization and the desperate hope of a young woman trying to save her people. Most disturbing of all, he could feel someone else's emotions throughout the day. Waves of fear, sadness, and confusion would wash over him for no reason. He would be eating breakfast and suddenly feel overwhelmed by loneliness. He would be walking to work and experience a surge of protective instinct. For someone he couldn't name, David began to suspect that the woman from his dreams was real. The connection he felt was too strong to be his imagination. Somehow, across the vastness of space, he was linked to her. He could sense her distress, her fear, her growing love for something precious she carried. It was during his lunch break on a Thursday that David first noticed the men in black suits. They were trying to be subtle, but his enhanced senses picked up their radio communications. They were talking about him, using code words and technical terms he didn't understand. Government agents, maybe military, definitely dangerous. Someone knew about what had happened during the sleep study. Someone was watching him, waiting for him to do something or become something. David realized he was no longer just a college student struggling to pay rent. He was a person of interest to people with resources and authority. That night, David packed a small bag and left his apartment through the fire escape. He didn't know where he was going, but he knew he couldn't stay. The connection he felt to the mysterious woman was growing stronger every day. He could sense her calling to him, not with words but with desperate emotion. She needed him, and somehow, despite the impossibility of it all, he needed her too. As David disappeared into the night, avoiding the agents who were closing in on his building, he made a decision that would change everything. He was going to find her. He didn't know how, and he didn't know where, but the pull in his heart was stronger than his fear. Across space, Princess Zara felt David's determination. The life growing inside her responded to his emotions, sending waves of warmth through her body. She placed both hands on her stomach and whispered the first promise she had ever made. "I will find a way to protect you both." The pregnancy was developing faster than any human pregnancy should. Her people's advanced biology was accelerating. The process, she had weeks, maybe days, before the baby would be born. And when that happened, both of their worlds would discover that the failed cloning experiment had created something far more dangerous and beautiful than anyone had imagined. The hunt for both of them was about to begin. David had been running for 2 days when he saw the lights in the sky. At first, he thought it was just an airplane, but the way it moved was all wrong. It hovered silently above the forest where he was hiding, then descended slowly like a falling star. His heart raced as he realized this wasn't human technology. The small ship landed in a clearing just 50 yards from where David was crouched behind a fallen tree. It was beautiful in a way that hurt to look at, made of some kind of metal that seemed to shift colors in the moonlight. As he watched, a section of the ship opened without making a sound. The woman from his dreams stepped out. She looked exactly as he remembered, but somehow more real. Her skin still had that soft glow, and her eyes still held the depth of space itself. But now she moved carefully, protectively, with one hand resting on her stomach. Even from a distance, David could see the gentle curve there. "David," she called softly. Her voice carried perfectly through the night air. "I know you're here. I can feel you." He stood up slowly, his legs shaking. This was impossible. This was crazy. but the pull in his chest was so strong that he couldn't resist walking toward her. With each step, the connection between them grew stronger. He could feel her relief, her fear, her desperate hope. "You're real," he whispered when he reached her. "Yes," she replied, and for the first time since he'd known her, she smiled. "My name is Zara, and we need to talk." They sat together on a fallen log while she told him everything. About her dying planet, about the mission to clone humans, about the accident that had connected them in ways neither of their species had ever experienced. David listened with growing amazement as she explained that he wasn't just a random college student anymore. He was part of something that could change the fate of two worlds. "The baby," she said, placing his hand gently on her stomach. "It's ours, part human, part Andromedan, the first of its kind." The moment David's palm touched her skin, he felt it, a tiny presence, warm and aware, responding to his touch. The baby somehow knew he was its father. He could feel its contentment, its sense of completeness now that both parents were together. "How is this possible?" David asked, tears streaming down his face. "I don't know," Zara admitted. "My people stopped having babies naturally centuries ago. We thought it was primitive and efficient. But this feels like the most natural thing in the world." As they talked, David's enhanced senses picked up something alarming. The sound of helicopters in the distance, getting closer. Vehicle engines on the forest roads. Radio chatter filled with urgent commands, both human military and something else, something that made his skin crawl with fear. "They're coming," he said, standing up quickly. "Both sides," Zara nodded grimly. "My people want to bring me home and eliminate what they see as contamination. Your people want to study us. Both, neither side understands what we've created." She led him to her ship, which was bigger inside than it looked from outside. The interior was filled with soft, warm light that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere. As they lifted off, David watched the forest below fill with searchlights and military vehicles. "Where are we going?" he asked. "I don't know," Zara replied honestly. "Somewhere safe, somewhere we can figure out what to do next." As they flew through the night sky, staying low to avoid detection, Zara explained more about their situation. The baby was developing incredibly fast because of her people's advanced biology. What should have taken 9 months was happening in weeks. They had maybe 5 days before the birth. 5 days, David repeated, trying to process it all. "And then what? Then our child will be born," Zara said. "The first true hybrid between our species, and everyone will want to control what that means." David felt the baby respond to their conversation, moving gently in Zara's womb. Somehow, he knew their child was already aware, already understanding the world it would be born into. The thought filled him with both wonder and terror. What if we just disappeared? He suggested, found some empty planet where no one could find us. Zara shook her head sadly. "My people would never stop looking. And your people have ways of tracking that you don't understand. Besides, this baby isn't just ours anymore. It represents hope for both our species." She explained that humans were destroying their own planet through pollution and war, while her people were dying out because they had forgotten how to adapt and grow. Their child could be the bridge between worlds, showing both species how to survive and thrive together. "But first," Zara said, "we need to find somewhere safe to have this baby. And we need to find people who will help us protect it." David thought about Dr. Catherine Mills, a professor from his university who had always been kind to him. She was a biologist who studied genetic mutations. If anyone could understand what was happening to them, it would be her. "I know someone," he said. "She's a scientist, but she's also a good person. She might help us." Zara looked at him with hope in her eyes. "Are you sure we can trust her?" "I don't know," David admitted, "but we have to trust someone. We can't do this alone." As they flew toward the city where Dr. Mills lived, both David and Zara felt the baby moving more actively. It was as if their child knew that important decisions were being made. The little hybrid was already showing signs of the intelligence it would inherit from both parents. Behind them, the sky was beginning to fill with both human aircraft and Andromedan ships. The hunt was intensifying. Time was running out. But for the first time since the accident that brought them together, David and Zara felt hope. They had each other, they had their unborn child, and they had a plan. It wasn't much, but it was a start. As the lights of the city appeared on the horizon, David squeezed Zara's hand. "Whatever happens," he said, "we're in this together." She squeezed back, and through their connection, he felt her love washing over him. It was the strongest emotion he had ever experienced, and it gave him the courage to face whatever was coming next. Their child was going to be born into a world that might not understand it, but it would be born into love, and sometimes love was enough to change everything. Dr. Catherine Mills was grading papers in her small office when she heard the soft knock on her door. It was past midnight, and the university building was supposed to be empty. When she opened the door, she found David standing there with a woman she had never seen before. The woman's skin had an unusual glow, and her eyes seemed to hold depths that made Catherine feel dizzy. "David," she asked, confused, "what are you doing here so late? And who is this?" "Dr. Mills," David said. "Urgently, I need your help. We both do. And I know this is going to sound crazy, but I need you to listen to the whole story before you decide we're insane." Catherine had always liked David. He was one of her brightest students, curious and kind, but the way he looked now scared her. His eyes were different, sharper somehow, and the woman beside him was clearly not human, though Catherine couldn't explain how she knew that. "Come in," she said quietly, "but make it quick. Security makes rounds every hour." As they sat in her cramped office, surrounded by books and scientific journals, David told her everything about the sleep study, about Zara's people, about the accident that connected them. Catherine listened with growing amazement and terror. When Zara placed her hand on her stomach and explained about the baby, Catherine nearly fell out of her chair. "Show me," Catherine whispered. Zara lifted her shirt slightly, revealing the gentle curve of her pregnancy. But this wasn't like any human pregnancy Catherine had ever seen. The skin seemed to glow softly, and she could swear she saw movement that was too coordinated, too purposeful for a normal unborn baby. "It's developing incredibly fast," Zara explained. "My people's biology is accelerating the process. The baby will be born within days." Catherine reached out with trembling hands, and Zara guided her palm to her stomach. The moment Catherine's hand touched Zara's skin, she felt it, a presence, warm and aware, that seemed to recognize her as a friend. The baby somehow knew she was a scientist, someone who could help. "This is impossible," Catherine breathed, "but it's also the most beautiful thing I've ever experienced." Their moment of wonder was interrupted by the sound of helicopters outside. Through the window, they could see searchlights sweeping across the campus. Military vehicles were surrounding the science building. "They found us," David said, his enhanced hearing picking up radio chatter. "Both sides are here." Catherine looked out the window and saw something that made her blood run cold. The helicopters weren't just military. Some of them were moving in ways that defied physics, hovering to silently, turning to sharply. Alien technology mixed with human forces. "There's a service tunnel in the basement," Catherine said quickly. "It connects to the old steam system. We can get to the parking garage without being seen." As they made their way through the darkened building, Zara suddenly stopped and placed both hands on her stomach. "Something's wrong," she whispered. "The stress is affecting the baby. It's trying to come now." David felt the baby's distress through their connection. Their child was scared, confused by the emotions of its parents. The little hybrid was trying to be born early, triggered by the danger surrounding them. "We need to find a safe place," Catherine said. "Somewhere sterile, somewhere I can help if the baby comes." They made it to the underground tunnels just as soldiers entered the building. Above them, the tunnels were old and damp, filled with pipes and electrical cables. Catherine led them through the maze, heading toward the medical building where she sometimes worked on research projects. Behind them, they could hear voices and footsteps. The search was getting closer, but ahead of them was something even more frightening. The tunnel was filled with an eerie blue light that definitely wasn't human technology. Andromedan forces, Zara said grimly. They're in the tunnels too. They were trapped between two armies, both wanting to capture them for different reasons. David's government wanted to study them as weapons. Zara's people wanted to eliminate what they saw as contamination. Neither side cared about the love between David and Zara or the miracle of their unborn child. There, Catherine pointed to a maintenance room. We can hide in there until they pass. The small room was filled with old equipment and cleaning supplies. They huddled together in the darkness, listening to the sounds of the search growing closer. Zara's contractions were getting stronger, and she was trying not to make noise. The baby's coming, she whispered. I can't stop it. David held her hand while Catherine gathered what medical supplies she could find in the room. It wasn't much, but it would have to do. Their child was going to be born in a maintenance closet, surrounded by danger, with only their love to protect. I can feel both armies getting closer, David said, his enhanced senses picking up movement in the tunnels. They're going to find us soon. Catherine looked at the two young people she was trying to help. David, her former student, now something more than human. Zara, a princess from another world, carrying a baby that could change everything, and soon, a child that would be the first of its kind. Then we make our stand here, Catherine said, firmly. This baby is going to be born, and we're going to protect it no matter what. As Zara's labor intensified, the sounds of the search grew louder. Voices in the tunnels, speaking both English and languages that hurt to hear. Footsteps getting closer, the glow of flashlights and alien technology seeping under the door. David squeezed Zara's hand. Whatever happens, he said, our baby is going to know it was loved from the moment it was born. Zara nodded, tears streaming down her glowing cheeks. And it's going to know that its parents fought for it, no matter what the cost. The baby was coming, whether the world was ready or not, and outside the door, the civilizations were about to discover that some things were more powerful than armies or technology. Love was about to change everything. The maintenance room fell silent except for Zara's quiet breathing. Catherine had managed to create a clean space using lab coats and bottled water she found in the supplies. David held Zara's hand, feeling every contraction through their connection. The baby was coming, and there was no stopping it now. I can see the head, Catherine whispered in amazement. The baby's glowing, and it was true. As their child entered the world, a soft, warm light emanated from its tiny form. The light wasn't harsh or blinding. It was gentle, like sunrise, like hope made visible. The baby's first cry was unlike anything any of them had ever heard. It wasn't just sound, it was pure emotion, washing over them in waves. David felt his heart explode with love as he looked at his daughter. She was perfect, with Zara's luminous skin and his own dark hair. But her eyes held something neither parent possessed, a wisdom that seemed ancient and new at the same time. She's beautiful, Catherine breathed, carefully cleaning the baby. She's absolutely perfect. The moment the baby was fully born, something incredible happened. A pulse of energy, gentle but powerful, spread out from the tiny child. It passed through the walls, through the tunnels, through the entire building. Every piece of electronic equipment within miles suddenly went quiet in the tunnels. Soldiers from both worlds stopped in their tracks. The pulse hadn't hurt them, but it had done something far more profound. For the first time in their lives, they felt complete peace. The human soldiers, trained for warfare, found themselves thinking about their families, their children, their hopes for the future. The Andromedan forces, who had forgotten how to feel emotions, suddenly remembered what it was like to experience wonder. General Peterson, who had been leading the human forces, was the first to lower his weapon. Tears were streaming down his weathered face as he felt emotions he had buried for decades. The pulse had awakened something in him that he thought was gone forever, the part of him that wanted to protect life instead of destroy it. Commander Vex, leading the Andromedan search, experienced something even more shocking. His people had eliminated the ability to cry centuries ago, considering it a weakness. But now, water flowed from his eyes as he felt the overwhelming beauty of new life. The hybrid child had somehow restored emotional pathways that his species had thought were lost forever. Stand down. Both commanders ordered their forces at the same time. All units, stand down. In the maintenance room, David and Zara were experiencing their own miracle. Their daughter, who they decided to name Luna, was looking at them with eyes that seemed to understand everything. She wasn't crying now. Instead, she was making soft, musical sounds that felt like laughter. She knows us, Zara whispered in wonder. She knows who we are. Catherine, who had delivered dozens of babies during her medical training, had never seen anything like this. Luna was alert and aware in ways that should have been impossible for a newborn. When Catherine spoke to her, the baby turned toward her voice and seemed to listen. She's going to be special, Catherine said. More than special. She's going to change the world. The door to the maintenance room opened slowly, but instead of soldiers with weapons, they saw General Peterson and Commander Vex standing together. Both men looked stunned, as if they had just awakened from a long dream. We're not here to fight, General Peterson said softly. We're here to witness. Commander Vex nodded, his voice filled with emotion he had never experienced before. The child, he said, she has given us back something we thought was lost forever. Over the following days, as news of Luna's birth spread through both civilizations, everything changed. The hybrid baby had somehow awakened dormant emotional pathways in both species. Humans who had become cold and calculating rediscovered compassion. Andromedans who had forgotten how to feel began experiencing the full range of emotions. For the first time in centuries, David and Zara became the first ambassadors of a new age. They worked together to help both peoples understand what Luna represented. She wasn't a weapon or a threat. She was a bridge between worlds, a living symbol of what was possible when different species chose cooperation over conflict. The technology exchange began almost immediately. Humans gained access to Andromedan healing technology that could repair their damaged planet. Andromedans rediscovered creativity and emotional intelligence through human art and culture. The dying planet that had sent Zara on her mission began to heal. As its people learned to feel hope again, Luna grew quickly, displaying abilities that amazed everyone who met her. She could communicate telepathically with both humans and Andromedans. She could understand complex scientific concepts while still being a playful, loving child. Most importantly, she had the gift of helping others see past their differences to find common ground. Other volunteers came forward, requesting the genetic fusion process that had created Luna. The procedure was refined and improved, creating a new generation of hybrid children who belonged to both worlds and neither. These children became natural peacekeepers, scientists, and artists, using their unique perspectives to solve problems that had seemed impossible. Catherine became the head of the new interspecies medical center, where she helped facilitate the creation of more hybrid children. She often marveled at how her quiet life as a biology professor had led to her becoming part of the most important scientific breakthrough in human history. Years passed, and Luna grew into a remarkable young woman. She had her father's kindness and her mother's wisdom, but she also possessed something entirely new, a perspective that encompassed both human emotion and Andromedan logic. She could see solutions where others saw only problems. David and Zara's love story became legend, but more importantly, it became proof that differences could be bridges rather than barriers. They had shown both species that love was stronger than fear, that cooperation was more powerful than conflict, and that the future belonged to those who chose hope over hatred. On Luna's 10th birthday, as she helped negotiate the first joint human Andromedan colony on Mars, David reflected on how far they had all come. The failed cloning experiment had become the foundation for a new kind of civilization, one where diversity was celebrated rather than feared. "Are you happy?" Zara asked him as they watched their daughter work with scientists from both worlds. David looked at his family, at the thriving colonies, at the children playing together regardless of whether they were human, Andromedan, or hybrid. "I'm more than happy," he said. "I'm hopeful. For the first time in my life, I truly believe." The future is going to be beautiful. Luna looked up from her work and smiled at her parents. In her eyes, they could see the promise of tomorrow. A future where the stars no longer seemed so far away and the universe felt a little less lonely. The clone that was never created had been replaced by something far more precious, a living symbol of what was possible when two hearts from different worlds chose to beat as one.